Hello and welcome to Holistic Circle Podcast Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philipp Kobald. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy. And I'm happy to have here today with me Emma Celeste. And I forgot where you're from. Sorry, Emma.
New Mexico, US.
Yes. Now I remember. From New York, Mexico. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I am so excited to have you. And the more I talk to you, the more excited I get. So if I start flying from the chair, it's all because it's a real treat for me today after a long podcasting day. This is, so to say, the final E on the dot. First, we usually like to start my podcast with inviting my guests to give a small introduction about themselves so people can get some background, and then we start rolling from there. I just would like to tell our viewers, please, we welcome your comments. We can't wait. There's a lot of space down on YouTube. Right away, click away, and thank you so much for being part of our conversation. If you'd be so kind, Emma.
Yeah. So I'm a neural repatterning coach. And essentially, what I do is I help people become aware of subconscious patterns that are no longer serving them in their lives. And we use relaxation techniques of the mind and the body to go into the subconscious mind to repattern those neural networks in the mind so that they can begin living the life that they dream of living without having anything holding them back.
All right. Okay. That is, so to say, a standard introduction, but there's a lot more going on with you than just basically work. And because when we talk, you're also a very open and spiritually interested person. You're like, you're a young searcher who already has searched and found a lot. So beside of the therapy part, there is also a very strong interest in spirituality and in personal growth and process. We will hopefully have time to talk about all of these elements today. That was the general idea. So just a little
Yeah,
bit, there's some interesting words, neural pathway and this and that. You're saying it. But I think not everybody really knows what it all means. And so maybe take a couple of minutes and can you explain our audience what does this mean precisely? And these are just technical terms, but what we're supposed to understand from these techniques.
sure. So, really, what it is as young children, we are absorbing the world around us. We are learning from our parents, from our caregivers, anyone that we're around consistently. And essentially, what we're doing is we're creating stories in our mind about what this all means. And so, a lot of the stories that we create as children are really beneficial. It teaches us a lot of really bad beneficial, or it's a lot of beneficial information. However, sometimes it's not beneficial to us. So, these would be, negative beliefs. So, things like, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, those types of beliefs. And we develop these as kids. And with our kid minds, there's no way for us to rationalize that maybe that's not the truth. So, what I help people do is get reintroduced to the stories that we created as children that are the negative beliefs in our minds. And we start to tell a new story. And what's happening in the brain is what the neural pathway is all about. We have neurocircuits in our brains that fire together. The more you repeat those stories, the stronger that circuit gets. However, if we change that story, then that neural circuit starts to get weaker and weaker and weaker, and a new neural circuit starts to become more powerful. And those are the neural pathways that then can serve us as
Is
adults.
this theoretical or is there scientific proof behind that?
There's scientific proof behind it. Yeah. So the study of neuroscience, they've been working pretty hard for about the last 15 years to prove what's going on in your mind as we're doing this type of work.
And the background is you have to be a therapist to do that. I don't understand the legal structure in the US so much. Europe is a game on its own. So you have to be like a licensed therapist, or everyone can do that who has an educational How does this work?
You definitely have to have a certification. So I have a certification in support and clinical hypnotherapy. And it was a school that I had to attend and, complete so many hours and take an exam and receive the certification.
Well, you just told me a couple of seconds ago before I pressed the button recording that you uh, already also a mother, right?
Yes.
And I'm a father, so basically here we go. How small is the world? Just, sorry, it's a long day, a little bit stupid. Just what I always wonder when I hear these conversations with people who are dealing with especially childhood trauma and you with your neural pathways, what I always ask myself is, are you very much concerned as a mother? Are you over careful, or how are you tackling this? Is this Are you thinking at the back of your head when you giving some messages to your kids to don't create a bad neural pathway, or how are you dealing with this?
Yes, it's always in the back of my mind. How am I potentially messing up my child right now? However, it's heavy to kind of carry that around with you all the time because as a human, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to have emotions and we're going to, you know, yell at our kids sometimes after a long day. So I think what's really big for me with my kids is I don't put the pressure on myself to be a perfect parent and to never give them anything negative to, program in their subconscious mind. What I'm really big on is repair. So if I know that I made a mistake and I exploded on my kid, I go back and I apologize and I tell them I'm sorry. You know, I didn't manage my emotions well and I'm sorry and you didn't deserve that. And I think repair goes a long way.
This is such great. Why did I not know this? I would have prepared a lot of great questions along the line, because this is it is a huge subject. I had a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago one of the leading American. I think she wrote more than 23 books about nutritionists. She's one of
Good.
the great, I think, American nutritionists, and she also has children. And if you listen to her, she's like a guru, and she's so relaxed and she's so much fun, and she's also, you make mistakes and you end up eating, some mac, whatnot, or some pizza in a party. And it's all fine. It's not like it's clearly not everyday pizza in the house. But,
Right.
you make mistakes. And as you said, I mean,
Yeah.
mistakes, you're human. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. There's no way to be perfect. And I don't think we came here to be perfect. So,
And that's a big relief. I think people need to hear this from therapists like you, and from that, like, nutrition therapists. I think people need to hear it. If a therapist says, "Well, I do make mistakes. I have a long day. I mean, I get nervous. I just click out." But the matter question is what happens next. This is then what makes a lasting damage, or it can be fixed. I think this
yeah.
is a very, very strong message. And if we would have known this, we would have spent a lot more time on this subject. But we're going to move on. But I think this is a podcast on its own, because parenting with mistakes, that should be so
Yeah.
much more embraced. And I think we should so much more celebrate our humanity and our failures. And as you said, question is what happens next. And I think this is a long way different, right? So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as long as you can take responsibility for, your ups and downs, you're just fine.
Did your kids, the older ones, already see a certain sensitivity? Have they responded? Do you see that they tackle, maybe that they have learned from you dealing with these kind of coming back and forward when they go to school, when they have conflicts? Have you a sense that they have learned new tools from you tackling such things, or that was be stretching it too far?
Uh, it's kind of hard to say because at their developmental stages, they're kind of like starting to make mistakes, that affect other people. And so think they're kind of just getting into those stages where they're learning, well, if I do this, then, this person gets really upset. I did this thing and I shouldn't have done that. And so a lot of what the conversations that I'm having with my kids a lot now is teaching them, yes, you made a mistake. this is how we can learn from it. If it involves a mess, like some of their mistakes, are really little things still, like making a big mess, spilling something and making a big mess. And so I'm kind of just now teaching them to walk through the phases of I made a mistake. I don't feel good inside right now because I know that I messed up. However, I think maybe this can cut into the beliefs that they create about themselves because they're not immediately going to, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm unworthy, I'm all these things, because I'm telling them, yes, I see that you made a mistake. Maybe it was even with me and I'm upset and this isn't okay. Here's my boundary. But this is how we repair and move forward. And I'm
It's in,
constantly reminding my kids all the time, even when you quote unquote misbehave or you make a mistake, I love you all the time, no matter what. And I think that helps them feel secure and okay in making mistakes. Like they don't have to be perfect.
you don't know it, maybe not, but it's one of the big themes of this podcast that I have like several times now, pedagogues and learning experts here on the podcast. This is one of the things I'm focusing a lot because spirituality usually involves a great deal of learning, if it's self
Yeah.
improvement and things like that. So the science of learning is one of the things that I think is always very valuable to people who want to improve spiritual as a person. That to look into the science of learning, I always think is a very valuable asset to have in the
Mhm.
toolbox. And they also had kids, and we had several conversations about kids and spirituality and things like that. So there was like already 7 or 8 podcasts focusing on these elements, and all of them together said that their most important element is being truthful to their kids.
Mhm.
That was always like a common thing to all of these 7 people, that in some moment one or the other they crystallized that being truthful with their children. And I think you just said in one way or the other the same. So it's like, you admit to your mistakes and
Mhm.
you share that with the kids, so you help them understand your adult reactions. So these elements seem to be the key of creating a healthy child environment, to be to some extent involved in the parents' emotional world.
Right. Yeah, and I think it goes to show that even adults make mistakes because I think a lot of kids growing up think adults have it all figured out and they're so perfect and they never do anything wrong, and it's not true. Like adults mess up all the time, and that's why I'm able to, have a career because people are just doing their best. They're doing their best with the information they've been given.
Your clients are from which age group usually, or which background? Yeah, I work with children as well, or you don't?
I don't work with children. No. In order to do this work, you have to have kind of an adult reasoning mind. And so I don't typically work with people under the age of 21 just because their minds haven't fully developed to be able to reason in the way that would allow them to create new stories.
All
And
right.
so I work with people, between the ages of I think my oldest client was in their 50s. So between the ages of like 20 to 50.
So I'm too old to be your client. Already above 50.
Definitely not. I would work with someone over the age of 50. I just haven't had the opportunity.
She's too old for me. All right.
That's the great thing about neuroplasticity, though, is that we can do this no matter what age. Well, unless once you have an adult reasoning mind. But yeah, you could be 90 years old and still do this work because everybody's brain has the ability to change.
You don't know this, but this morning I recorded a podcast where we were live witnessing a therapy session. So a therapist who works
Oh,
also in the same way, or the same structure like you, but with her own
mhm,
technique, I cannot compare. And she wanted so much to bring a patient and make a whole like half an hour program to let us show how this works. And she told us
mhm,
that it's a lot, the younger the brain is, the easier, the quicker the neural pathways can be realigned, or whatever is the terminology. And the older is, the longer it takes. And it was fascinating to hear. How many sessions do you usually calculate with your average patient to get some movement? What is your personal 3, 4, 5, 6, 1200? Where do you usually see with that? how many sessions are needed?
So on average, it's about 6. And that's just because it takes that amount of time to build on where you start to where you end up. However, I've done up to 10 because some people need a little bit more processing. I'm not familiar with the science behind like the age and it taking longer, but I guess it would make sense because the older you are, the longer you've been in these patterns. But I think if there's a willingness to shift the patterns, you can do it as quickly as you choose, really.
Right. And did I forget the question right now while I was asking? That is not a good sign for my neural pathways.
It's
This
been
is it's very troubling here right now. Oh dear Lord, I forgot my yes, there we go. Thanks the Lord. And what are the most common reasons people contact you? That's also be interesting to a little bit see what are the what are the clients' portfolio? What is the most common request you get?
I mean, I have done a wide variety of things. I think probably the most common inquiry is from somebody who feels stuck in their life and like they don't have a pathway forward or they can't get clear on a pathway forward. And so really when someone comes to me with that issue, we have to we'll do a little bit of talking and chatting and I help them get clear on what it actually is in their life that is making them feel stuck, and then we go from there. And sometimes it's relationships, sometimes it's work, sometimes it's mostly it's one of those 2 things actually, relationships, work. But I've helped people like I've had a client come to me because they were struggling with IBS, which is are you familiar with IBS?
Yeah, I think I heard the term a couple of times on the podcast, but please explain it.
Yeah, it's like an intestinal bowel irritation, I guess. It's like inflammation of the bowels and intestines, and it affects people in really big ways because sometimes they can't leave their houses because they have to consistently use the bathroom. And usually, or actually, kind of what we found is that from that client is that it started with feeling anxiety at a young age and kind of just dealing with it until they were older. And it started manifesting as the inflammation in the bowels and intestines.
There's a whole bunch of these things, but it's of course
Yeah.
still the rare cases. I mean, these stuff are on the rising, like those
Uh-huh.
hyper allergies and all of these conditioning things. There's a lot of it happening right
Right.
now, and it's just really coming up. But of course, still it is the rarer case. So I think we had
Different.
that sounds interesting to me for the reason is because I have everyday therapists on my on my interview platter, and it's fascinating to see which therapists work with people who kind of like hit the wall, the real hardcore therapists who work with massive trauma, where people like basically hit a brick wall and their life cannot continue if they don't start therapy, and they're
Mhm.
basically in a very vulnerable states. And the ones who more seek transformation. It sounds that you very softly more work with people that are like transformation seekers than people who are in the midst of a massive personal breakdown. Would that be correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
And that's why I ask you this is, do you think that is something that these days I'm quite fascinated about. Do you think it's your personality? Because I hear a lot that the therapist attracts the patients and the other way around. And do you think it's the way you marketize yourself or present yourself, or you think it's your personality that this more soft transitional thing works for you, and that's why you find the patient? It's more like a metaphysical question now.
I think it's both. And if we're on a spiritual podcast, so let's go there. I think that all of us are born into this life with a purpose. And I think a lot of the people that come to me feeling stuck in their lives are kind of just off track a little bit from their purpose. And so really what I'm helping them do is get in touch with their inner being or higher self, soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. I'm helping them get in touch with that part of them because that part of them is always connected to a higher power. And that is where all knowing is. And so everybody has this inside of them as long as they're, alive in a body. Everybody has that, but because as a human, we're so busy with everything outside of us all the time. We have disconnected from that infinite intelligence inside of us. And so essentially what my clients end up experiencing is, and depending on their beliefs, like I work with people who are religious, who are spiritual, and I can tailor it to them specifically. But what ends up happening by the end of the sessions is they realize that often they had the answers in them the whole time. I've even had people tell me, and I actually had this experience myself when I started doing this work before I started facilitating it. You come to realize that you knew what to do the entire time. You just didn't listen to it or you didn't trust it. And it's so easy to check out and scroll on your phone, or it's so easy to put on the TV or go out and distract yourself with friends and different things. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But if someone is feeling stuck in their life, it's because they're doing too much of that and not enough introspection and kind of like listening to their inner being.
Right. You said it perfectly. Now we're starting the spiritual side of this conversation and the spiritual podcast. So we're just easing in. It's just trying to softly bring it to the level where we can talk at the people level. First of all, I like your wording. Very interesting. Checking out interesting wording. And you brought in the mobile phones and you as a distraction tool. So let's just stay there for a minute. Why not? Is it a distraction tool? Do you think that's the that's let's be conspiracy theorists. Why not? I mean, why the hell? It's free of charge. Do you think it's a distraction tool per se, or it's just what we've been seeking? Again, chicken and egg kind of a question.
Yeah. I think that it's been turned into a distraction tool. I think you can use technology to your benefit. I mean, we have limitless information at our fingertips every single day. However, most people aren't using it to that extent. They're using it to check out and to get a quick dopamine hit from social media or whatever it is. Even people, I mean, I play, little games on the phone sometimes in my downtime. And I actually heard recently on a podcast that are receiving a false sense of accomplishment when they're playing video games, and whether that's on your phone or on a console, um, it's creating a false sense of accomplishment. And so, obviously, whenever I hear things like that, because I am very naturally introspective, I I will kind of like put it to the test. And so when I start playing a game, I like mostly like puzzle games, but I notice, if I win the puzzle game, I am getting that little hit of dopamine. And it does kind of give me a false sense of accomplishment. Like I could sit there for hours and just get this false sense of accomplishment, or I can get up and, you know, do something that's actually going to benefit myself, my family, and our future.
The-
And I've also been kind of testing my limits with social media. I only have Instagram, I have LinkedIn, but I've been deleting the apps from my phone because for a while, it was just such a habit. It was like a habitual pattern to just, as soon as I grab my phone, click on the Instagram app and start scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And sometimes 2 hours would pass by. And it just felt like such a waste of time for me. And so, kind of the balance that I've found that has been working for me is I just delete the app so that it's not an option. And I'll check in, once a week or once every other week. I'll download the app and check in, and then I delete it again because I don't like the person that I am when I'm glued to this device that's taking all of my attention. And then I find too that now that the apps are not there, when I do reach for my phone, I'm then reaching for a personal development or I'm reaching for a podcast. And so I'm starting to use my phone differently than I did before.
And I also was wondering because these days a lot, it's almost like it's sucking your energy. You have this feeling sometimes. It's almost it's
Yeah.
it's almost like an antenna that's sucking your energy. I don't know how to describe it best.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think you could call it an addiction. It's very it can be very addicting.
what you said about gaming is I have a couple of friends in the gaming industry, and there's a whole studies finally on social architecture and all of it, how to make people wanting more and making them purposely addicted and giving them constantly little rewards. That reward
Yeah.
thingy, and there's a science already behind it. There's like a library of book written how to. There's like millions of dollars invested into psychologists to create programs how really people into these games, and almost like a sector structure. So you're right. This love bombing and this constant reaffirming and this constant bling 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 is really making people addictive. It's totally crazy. I'm with you
Yeah.
on that one. But let's stay on the spiritual side of things because there's so much going on, and we're a little bit drifting. Is my fault here, but what can we do? Because there's a lot of interesting things that you pointing out. Now, let's go back. Well, let's make a jump. You said that you had a strong spiritual urge, journeying, spiritual awakening, spiritual moments. So let's make a brutal cut and let's go right to you. And let's maybe a little bit tell us about your spiritual journey. And then from there, we'll bring it back into order. And I promise you, I'll bring it all together in the end. I'll make it happen.
Yeah, sure. So, I was actually raised Catholic, and I practiced Catholicism until I was about 20 years old, and I was in college. And as far as I can remember, I always felt kind of a confusion in the Catholic teachings because they seemed to contradict themselves very often. And even as a young child, I noticed kind of like, well, you said this thing, but then you said this other thing that doesn't add up with this. And I'm confused about that. And no one could ever really explain it in a way to me that brought it full circle and made it make sense. And so um, I stayed in the religion because that's how I was raised. And, you go to church on Sunday and you pray. And I think the biggest thing I got out of it was to have belief and faith in a higher power, whatever that is, whatever the name is, whatever you want to call it. Um, I, around the age 20, I started kind of flirting with non denominational Christianity. And I actually did feel like that type of religious teaching resonated a little bit better with me. However, those like similar contradictions would come up. And one day, I was at a church service and I just left kind of feeling like this doesn't feel like the right fit for me anymore. And so that's kind of when I started my personal growth and personal development deep dive. As a person, I naturally, if something is interesting to me, I will naturally deep dive into it. And so I had heard that the book, The Four Agreements, was a really good place to start in terms of personal development and personal growth. And for me, it was true. I benefited from that book in such a big way that it essentially opened my mind to like what is possible and why are we here? And, like what's the purpose of being a human? Because it can't just be I come here, I grow up, I maybe have a family, maybe have a career, and then I die someday. It just seemed too limited for me, for my brain. And so I started to venture out into different, personal development types of things. I think at that point, podcasts weren't really big, but kind of inspirational YouTube videos were starting to get more popular. So I learned about a lot of people through listening to inspirational YouTube videos. Tony Robbins was a big influence for me like early on in my spiritual journey. And he's a life coach and his technique is to really like get people excited and feeling really good and getting them to feel good about themselves and about each other. And I just really like him. He's a really good person and his story is great. If you've never heard his story, I would recommend looking it up and learning how he got to where he is. Anyway, eventually, it was a cousin of mine actually. She recommended this book called The Journey of Soul. And this is a book written by a hypnotherapist who did a study with his clients where he was taking them into the interlife. And that's essentially the space between being in a human body and being in the ethereal realm or in heaven or whatever the term is for it. Um, that book was so intriguing to me because it really stretched my mind to think there's more than just this human experience. Like, this is just a small part of it. That book was actually what led me to wanting to get certified in hypnotherapy as well, because learning the power of the mind and where it could take you was just so interesting to me. And I wanted to know everything there is to know about it. And so that led me to hypnotherapy school, which led me to where I am today, doing the neural repatterning work that I do. And really, I joke about this, with like close friends and stuff, but I'm kind of always doing a research study in my mind with every client that I have because I also want to notice and note patterns that people have. Like, this person came to me with a similar problem. This is how it was resolved. Is it similar to what I did with this other client that came to me with the same issue? And so I think that will probably be my lifetime's work is, starting to connect some of those pieces because I haven't had enough clients to really have like a true study. But it's intriguing to me. And I'm fascinated by the mind and how it works and how we can recreate anything we want in there.
Right. Did you all have these experiences with those deep hypnosis yourself where you've had into past lives and things like that? Or did you have those experiences already?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, before I started facilitating this work, I was a client myself and I did deep work on myself. I have done past life regression. I visited a couple of past lives. I can facilitate past life regressions for people too, and I have done it a couple of times. It's tricky though, because in order to do a past life regression, it's not just for fun and information. I guess it could be, but I really want to help people. And so, in order for a past life regression to be beneficial, there really has to be a disconnect with the issue that they are experiencing and this lifetime. So, one example would be if someone has like this terrible fear of flying and they've never been on a plane before, or they've been on planes before, but nothing has ever happened. So, something like that, we could probably connect to a past life. And in that way, it would benefit them because it helps them heal the cause of the fear in this life so that they can move forward and be able to fly or whatever, the issue is. But yeah, I've had past life regressions. It's really interesting. A lot of people are kind of, what's the word? They're skeptical about whether it's true or not. And I always tell them the same thing, whether it is true or not, your subconscious mind is giving you a story that's going to help you heal. So you can take it as that. And, usually that helps people kind of, whether it's real or not, doesn't need to be real or not. It's about the story and the symbolism and what you need to move forward.
Right. And what you said about that tapping into that heaven energy, and that none of my guests use the word astral travel. I think it's a nice and
Mhm.
funny one. Did you already experiment with that as well? Had you the chance to have it by chance or through guidance to experience to be connecting with this light, or this is not is still waiting for you?
Well, so to induce someone into a past life regression, we go into the interlife for just a brief moment. I haven't ever spent an extended amount of time with a client in that space.
Yeah, I mean, just you
However,
yourself. I mean, you as a person.
oh, me myself. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the same. So when I went through my own personal development was after I had already gone to school and I would work with, classmates. and we'd do sessions for each other. My personal experience, the first time I ever did this work, felt like magic. Like, wow, there's so much beyond what we can see physically. And to connect with that part of yourself, the only thing I guess I can really say that could describe it is if anyone ever needed proof that there is a God or a higher power, it would be doing this work because you really truly go in there and you feel the connection and it's a knowing. It's just like this deep knowing that whether we see this all the time or not, it's real. And because you're experiencing it. And it's not typically something that you even see when you're relaxed and you're in the session. It's really just truly a deep knowing. You can just feel it in your inner being.
Finally, we come where I wanted to start the podcast. It took me 37 minutes, but I got there. We got there eventually. Because this is actually where I was thinking we would start our conversation somewhere, but it needed time to come here no matter what. So let's make the best out of it. First of all, do you agree with me that there is a new interest in your generation and the people compared to the generation before? Do you again see a new interest in these phenomena, in these realities? This is the first question. Let me quick ask the second one as well, because who knows if I remember. And it's also been, go ahead. I'm finished.
Okay. I do. I think that in my generation, a lot of people have kind of outgrown maybe I don't even know what it would be, like the structure of religion. They've they've outgrown it a little bit and they want to seek deeper meaning. And not to say that, people can't find that in religion, because I think that they totally can. However, I think a lot of people in my generation have thought something bigger than what religion may offer.
So it is,
And I also
I'm so fascinated now I can go crazy here because it's so interesting that you putting it, you're the generation, so you must tell me what do I know? But you're putting it on the not being satisfied with what religion has to offer. And I would have answered this question saying that basically, as I said, the mobile phones and the numbness and the emptiness of this also, I would say, because I'm from Europe, consumerism that just, buying, throwing away, buying again. It's just so many empty gestures, so many distractions that leaves such a hole. See, it's how interesting we answer. Who would have answered that same question?
yeah. I mean, I that probably has something to do with it too. People are trying constantly to fill themselves up from the outside when it's an inside job. And I think that's a lot of people, especially my generation, are starting to learn. Even the therapy trend, like people in my generation are like almost everyone I know is in therapy. And I think even a generation above us, it was a shameful thing to go to therapy because it meant something was wrong with you or you can't cope with life on your own and that's weakness or whatever the stories were. So I think my generation is also just a lot more open to being introspective and that often leads people on a spiritual journey.
Absolute. So I agree with you there. I can see a whole new interest in the subject, and because I'm old enough to have just a little bit touched the hippie generation, and and little bit other generation was completely empty or still absolutely nothing. So I'm just at the absolute end of the hippie movement, and I can finally see that there is something happening again. And it's not only me, it's like all the old folks saying, wow, there's so much buzzing and so much interest. I have 50 something clairvoyant teachers who said her class is full of young people, like, where they're all coming from. And they want to learn how to be clairvoyant, how to be this and how to be that. It's everybody's like a little bit overwhelmed. We didn't have that many students for the last 20 years, and all of a sudden the world is interested, the world is opening up. So I'm completely
Yeah.
with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, and I think with each generation too, it's a little more open than the one before. And so I would love to think that, my kid grow up someday and this is just normal to them, talking about spirituality and astral travel and the interlife and intuition and clairvoyance. I would love to see their generation just that's just the norm. Everyone talks about that and it's not taboo anymore and it's not woo woo oh, we don't talk to those types of people. Those people are crazy. So,
We had a
and
couple.
I mean it's a possibility because, I am who I am and I'm raising my kids to believe in similar things. I teach them what I learn and I teach them to have a relationship with the higher power, to be grateful when they have, intuitive moments. I like to acknowledge that and say, yeah, that's your intuition. That's your intuition talking to you. That's the part of you that's connected to a higher power.
Have you been planning, or are you working on developing your clairvoyant skills? That's something that's also for you on the menu, or not really?
Yes, absolutely. I actually just inquired with a program to begin intuitive development because it's something that I've been interested in my entire life. I have always had dreams where people who have passed away visit me in my dreams, and they often have messages for the people that they left behind. And this has been happening to me since I was a child. And so I'm very curious. I'm very interested. I would love to develop that part of me, especially because I think it would benefit my client eventually too, to have just a deeper knowledge of how I could help them and how I could help them see themselves for the inner being that they are.
Right. So almost coming to the end. So, but where would you see the root? One more time, I'm asking the same question, but I'm trying it again. So one more time, where would you see the root? That there's this your personal root that you are looking out there, that you have the need to find the spiritual answers. Have this. Are you looking for confirmation for God? Is that why you do all of it? Because you wanna that you get the deep knowing, you got the deep knowing through those experiences, and I think I know what you mean. Is it so? What's the emptiness? What's the feeling? What's the urge? What's the search? Just a little bit one more time. Take us around, if you may.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole point of doing this type of work is just to reconnect with the purpose that you came here with. And so, if I'm talking, on a soul level, I believe that our souls come from wherever they come from, their energy. Science is starting to study this now too, energy work. But our souls come from wherever they come from with on a mission to grow and transform into something bigger. And so we're using this human body. The best way I've actually heard this said is that we are in spirit guide school on earth. And so we come here to learn as many soul lessons as we can until we reach a point where maybe we don't have to be in a physical body anymore and we can be more in the background of the people or the souls that are still in human bodies to help them then grow and transform. And so it's kind of a cycle is the way that I see it.
Let me ask a very ridiculous question. If you think where you want to be at some moment and where you are now, where would you, it's a stupid question, but where would you put yourself, from 1 to 10, from where you are and where you want to be in your spiritual journey, and that the things that you have found? I mean, I couldn't answer it, but I'm asking anyway.
It is a tricky question. I mean, it's hard to say because I don't have the memories of any of my past lives.
There you go.
Um
There you go.
yeah, yeah, so I'm
Because see,
uh
the reason I'm asking you, because I had a conversation recently with a woman approximately your age. I mean, I don't know your age, but I guess it's somewhere around. And she's like basically as, oh, you have years in front of me, like, oh, you have years of development in front of you, and you're building up, and and a tip like me believe it needs like 30 years to a little bit know what's going on with spirituality, things like. And she says, no, 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 no. I connected my past life. I had like, I don't know, how past life, and I immediately tap in and take all the knowledge and all the spiritual wisdoms from 100 lives, and I start right there. I don't start at the beginning. This is already where I start. So basically, I'm like crazy, like some Buddha enlightened. And what the hell, I'm 20 something year old, and I'm basically Buddha. So, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. I mean, why I'm sitting 30 years and meditating if I just, could have tapped in and here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't, I guess maybe I don't know exactly where my soul needs to go either. Like that's information for my higher self to know and manage. And me in this human body, I'm responsible for staying on my path and getting as far as I get in this life. And then, you incarnate again and you do the same thing in the next until essentially your higher self or your soul says, okay, we don't need to incarnate anymore. We can now come kind of take a background seat and be assigned to this other soul who's still incarnating and following their soul path and growing. I mean, there's no way to know this exactly 100% because we're in a human body. However, with my studies and the people that I learn from and the experiences that I've had, all of this really resonates with me. And I think you could speak to this in many different ways that could resonate with other people. This is just what makes sense to me in my human brain.
I think this is a wonderful ending. I must apologize for being an upside down podcast, but sometimes it happens. That, but I can feel a certain softness in your energy, and I can almost feel you as a therapist. Of course, I can only imagine if this is how you are at the podcast, but I kind of feel that you are authentic and that is how you are as a therapist. And I think a lot of people who've seen this today get a sense and the feeling how you can help them, how you can work with them. And to me, you look like a gentle force,
Thank you.
and that is something wonderful and I'm sure very pleasant. And I wish you that from 1 to 10, that I wish you that you're somewhere on number 1.5. That would be the best. And as I wish for myself after more than 30 years that I maybe in 1.3, because the more down I am, the more there is up there to still discover. And that's the wish I have for you, for me, and for everybody listening. So thank you so very much. Down here, you find all the links and information. And it was a gentle force of a podcast with very confused host. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.